Well, I think Ohio and every other state that I'm aware of has suffered as a result of the recession and the collapse of the housing market, and part of that obviously has resulted in the issue that we're trying to deal with this legislation. We believe that the community will be benefited, that blighted neighborhoods will be improved, and that communities can be strengthened. But there's no doubt of the fact that nearly every community of any size has suffered greatly as a result of the fallout from the recession and the resulting foreclosures and abandoned properties that have come as a result.
Do you see a time when this law won't be necessary anymore?
Well, I certainly would hope so. But quite frankly, I think this tool is a good tool for communities to have available to them, whether or not there is a particular crisis. Because I think long before the recession and the current housing crisis, communities perhaps were lacking, and in my judgment they were lacking in the ability to proactively protect themselves from properties that may be abandoned. I don't know, Peter, if you want to say more about that.
Just real quickly, as the governor just said, I think that the recession and the foreclosure crisis made it more urgent for this legislation to pass, and I think that's why where we were not successful in House Bill 1, and including all the counties, we were successful relatively quickly with 313. But even before that, this is a tool that is very, very important to be able to stabilize, revitalize neighborhoods, to return dollars back to the various jurisdictions that depend on property taxes. So this is something that was needed. In a perfect world, none of this would have been needed. But the reality is this, that we have to continue to fight the battle of both, not just of urban decay now, but suburban and even rural areas as well.
How will Ohioans know if this is working?
Pardon?
How will Ohioans know if this is working?
I think that the way you're going to know is everything else that ought to be benchmarked in a sense. The number of houses that have won, or buildings and property, that have been acquired by the land bank, how quickly they are turned around for productive use, how many dollars are being put back into the community in tax dollars that are now not being put back into schools and libraries and into other entities. So I think this, by the way, is very much the kind of a public initiative that can very much be benchmarked and can very much be tested in how successful it's been. And by the way, the bottom line of it, I think ultimately will be in stabilization of property values. Because what happens, this to me is a property rights bill. Because House 1 can be abandoned, have serious problems with it. 3 doors down, somebody who has paid their mortgage, kept up their house, all of a sudden the value of the property has gone down. And so our ability to be able to stabilize property values for everyone becomes very important, and this is a critical tool for that.
You know, I just want to add, this deals with kind of the post-foreclosure chaos that occurs in communities. But we've still got 2 bills that have come over from the House that are sitting in the Senate that deal with pre-foreclosure judgment cases in House Bill 3 and House Bill 9. And while I'm here, I want to take the opportunity, if I can, to again urge the Senate to act on those bills. It's a way to, if they have destabilized communities through kind of the foreclosure crisis over the last 10 years. This helps stabilize it at the end of the foreclosure process, but we've got 2 bills out there that the Senate needs to act on that can stabilize before foreclosure takes place.
Why doesn't the free market work? Why doesn't that work? Just letting entrepreneurs come in and buy up abandoned houses cheap, and then entrepreneurs using their entrepreneurial skills to fix them up and make a profit. Why does government need to step in instead?
I'll answer that in a quick minute, but Auditor Kapsakevich just pointed out that in Flint, Michigan, which was the start of the land bank, to answer for you, 27,000 homes saw an increase in the appropriation value of their properties by about 160%. $17 million?
In the first 3 years of the Flint Land Bank, which in a lot of ways this is modeled after, aggregate property values in that community went up by $112 million, and 26,000 individual properties saw their values go up, just in the first 3 years. My attitude is they can do it in Flint, we can do it anywhere in Ohio, but that's an answer to your specific question, how will people see it better?
The response to your question is it's going to take a lot more time than we have here, but very clearly what we've seen is basically what this bill does, government does, is to help, from our perspective, is to help the private sector to work more effectively. And basically it is going to be able to take property, it is going to be able to clear title on property, it is going to try to bring responsible developers, whether they're individuals, small entrepreneurs, or larger developers, to be able to do something with the property. And very clearly, it is, from my perspective, an assist to the private sector, not hindrance to the private sector.
And quite frankly, the status quo is not working. There's nothing right now that would keep private developers from doing this, but obviously it isn't happening.
Does anybody here have an estimate on how many properties statewide could go into a land bank right now?
Greater Ohio?
No.
Is there a certain, this adds 41 counties, but is there a certain type of county where this is probably going to be more beneficial than others? Is there certain factors that are going on inside of a county where you say you are definitely a county that should be looking at this, or maybe you're a county that probably this might not be as beneficial for?
Well, let me stress again, this is local option, okay? A county has to have the consensus built among townships, among the city, the major city in the community, among the countywide elected officials, and even the private sector are part of this process. Obviously, initially, I think when this started, those who are committed to land banks were looking at communities that perhaps the center city or the core community had the greatest problems with abandoned property. Then it was the inner ring suburbs. Today, by the way, and I don't want to cite the statistics, but if you look at communities like Perrysburg in northwest Ohio, where the number of foreclosures in high-value communities are increasing as well. So it's going to be those kinds of communities and those kind of counties where issues of foreclosure, issues of abandoned property are kind of continuing to spread throughout the county. And I think you're going to find, you may be pleasantly surprised at the number of counties who are going to be taking a hard look at this.
Or a net investment for the taxpayer itself. Is the taxpayer potentially going to make a profit
there? The governor invited me to speak, so I first want to say that maybe it's been glossed over. That really is the key difference to this bill, what's happening here. Land banks have been around since the 1970s. In our community, Toledo's had a land bank since 1988 or 89. What's different here is the fact that this is a land bank with funding attached, and that is what is fundamentally different. To answer your question, I don't believe, and this is just my philosophy, that the land, it's not the intent of the land bank to be a moneymaker. The intent of the land bank is to improve our communities, to allow our neighborhoods to take control of their own destinies instead of being held hostage by speculators and out-of-town interests. That is how I think we'll judge the success of this program, not by whether the land bank turns a profit. I think the community at large will reap a financial benefit, as we mentioned in the answer to this question. Again, in the first 3 years in Flint, Michigan, aggregate property values went up $112 million. 26,000 individual properties saw an increase. That benefits the whole community. That's how I would answer any dollars and cents question.
All right, thanks. We have time for one more question.